I stood in their kitchen, the smell of rosemary chicken still clinging to the air, as my daughter-in-law smiled over her wine glass and said, "My mother's coming. Why don't you sleep on the floor for a few days?" My son didn't flinch. He just kept carving the chicken. So I nodded, smiled, folded my hands in my lap like a guest in my own life. And later, I made sure the floor was the only thing she'd ever inherit from me. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The Sunday light slanted through Jason and Rachel's kitchen windows, laying soft gold over the dining table like a careful brushstroke. The air carried the smell of rosemary chicken, baked rolls, and something sweeter. A pie cooling on the counter that no one had the heart to cut yet. Mabel sat near the end of the table, her posture straight, her smile polite, her hands folded in her lap like she was holding herself together. Jason carved the chicken with a kind of nervous precision, the blade scraping gently against the serving plate. Rachel, already halfway through her first glass of wine, tapped her spoon on the edge of her plate for attention. "So," she said brightly, "I have news." Everyone looked up. Lily paused mid-bite, and even Evelyn, quiet, watchful Evelyn, set her fork down. "My mother's coming to stay for a week," Rachel announced, grinning as if this were good news for everyone at the table. "You know how she loves to visit when the weather turns." Jason smiled weakly. "That's great," he managed. Rachel swirled her wine. "It'll be a full house, though. We'll have to get creative with the sleeping arrangements." She turned to Mabel, her voice syrupy and playful. "You don't mind making a little adjustment, do you?" Mabel blinked. "Adjustment. Oh, Rachel said, waving a hand as if it were nothing. "Why don't you sleep on the floor for a few days? It'll be cozy." The words hung in the air like a dare. Jason chuckled, the sound brittle. "Rach, come on." But Rachel only tilted her head, eyes glinting. "What, it's just for a few nights. Mom can't handle the sofa bed with her back." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut through the hum of the refrigerator. Lily looked from her father to her stepmother to Mabel, her lips pressing into a thin line. She slipped her hand beneath the table, reached for a napkin, and began to write something quickly with the pen she'd been using to doodle earlier. Mabel gave a small, practiced smile, the kind that said she'd learned long ago how to disguise discomfort. She nodded once. "Of course," she said softly, "if that makes things easier." Rachel clapped her hands. "Perfect, that's settled." She took another sip of wine, the corner of her mouth twitching in satisfaction. Lily folded the napkin neatly and passed it under the table, a quiet gesture hidden from everyone but Mabel. Mabel opened it just enough to read, "You don't deserve that. Don't let her make you feel small." Her chest tightened. She tucked the napkin into her tidy purse, the one she always kept close like armor. When she looked up, everyone was laughing, Jason at some deflective joke, Rachel basking in her own charm, Lily pretending along to keep the peace. Mabel's smile stayed steady, but her eyes had gone distant, reflecting the afternoon light like glass. After lunch, when the dishes were cleared and Jason disappeared to the backyard to check the grill that didn't need checking, Evelyn found Mabel on the porch. The older woman leaned against the railing, her coffee cooling in her hand. For a long while, neither spoke. The trees whispered above them. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and fell silent again. Evelyn finally said, "You handled that with more grace than I would have." Mabel exhaled, a small, tired laugh escaping her. "There's no point making it worse. She likes getting a reaction." Evelyn turned her head, studying Mabel's face. "I saw that smirk," she said quietly. "The one she gave you right after you agreed." Mabel blinked, replaying the moment. The glint in Rachel's eye, the slight curl at her mouth. A smirk of triumph, not teasing. "That smirk tells you everything you need to know," Evelyn said. Her voice was low but steady, each word carrying weight. "Some people show you who they are in just one look." Mabel didn't answer right away. She just stared out toward the street, where sunlight flickered off the parked cars like distant flashes of warning. Inside, laughter rose again, Rachel's laugh, high and bright, slicing through the air. Mabel's fingers brushed the edge of her purse, feeling the folded napkin inside. For the first time, she didn't just hear the laughter. She saw it for what it was, control disguised as charm. She straightened her shoulders. Behind her, Evelyn said quietly, "Be careful. When someone smirks like that, they're already planning their next move." Mabel's voice came out barely above a whisper. "So am I." The house was quiet the next afternoon, the kind of quiet that made every sound feel sharper. Jason had taken Lily to soccer practice, and Rachel was at her office, leaving the place in a hush Mabel rarely got to keep. She moved through the living room with slow, deliberate steps, a dustcloth in one hand. Though she wasn't really cleaning, she was thinking. The smirk from the day before still hovered in her mind like smoke that refused to clear. Every time she replayed it, something inside her tightened. A mixture of shame and something colder, harder. When she reached Jason's office, she hesitated in the doorway. The blinds were half drawn, stripes of afternoon light falling across his desk. His laptop was closed, papers stacked in careful disorder, a faint smell of coffee clinging to the air. She wasn't snooping, she told herself. She was looking for peace of mind, some reassurance that her instincts were wrong. But when her eyes caught a manila folder labeled Bungalow Title, Joint Ownership, her breath stuttered. Her bungalow, the one she'd bought after her husband died. The small place she'd held onto even when money was thin, and Rachel had called it quaint. Mabel reached for the folder as if it might vanish if she didn't move quickly enough. The documents inside were crisp, official-looking, stamped and signed. Only she didn't remember signing any of them. At the bottom of one page, under owner signatures, she saw her name written neatly, but it wasn't her handwriting. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She was still holding the papers when Jason came in, keys jingling in his hand. He froze when he saw her standing there. "Mabel, what are you doing in here?" She turned slowly, the papers trembling just enough for him to notice. "You want to tell me why my name's on documents I didn't sign?" Jason's eyes darted to the folder, then back to her. "It's nothing. Just paperwork." "Paperwork," she repeated flatly. "For convenience," he added quickly. "You know, tax reasons, probate stuff." Rachel said, "Well, it's just easier to have things organized jointly. Makes everything simpler if..." "If what, Jason?" Her voice was calm, but the air around her vibrated with quiet anger. "If I disappear, if I die." He winced. "Don't talk like that, Mom." She stared at him for a long moment, watching the way his jaw tightened, the way guilt flickered across his face before he masked it. "Rachel told you to do this, didn't she?" He didn't answer. That silence was its own confession. Later that evening, Lily found Mabel in the kitchen, staring out the window as the sky bruised into purple. The girl leaned against the counter, her voice barely above a whisper. "They said it's to simplify things," she murmured. "That's what Dad told me when I asked. But you never signed, did you?" Mabel looked down at her granddaughter, a tremor of sadness crossing her face. "No, sweetheart, I didn't." Lily frowned. "Then that's not simplifying. That's stealing." Mabel reached over, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's cheek. "Don't worry, I'm not as easy to steal from as they think." Evelyn stopped by just after dinner, bringing her usual candor and a 6-pack of ginger ale. When Mabel showed her the copies she'd made, neatly photographed and printed on her little home printer, Evelyn's expression hardened. "That's how they start," she said, setting the can down with a thunk. "First they move a line on a deed, then they move you right out of your own house." Mabel folded the documents back into a plain envelope marked in tidy handwriting, "Important." She slipped it into her purse, next to Lily's napkin. Her fingers lingered there for a moment, feeling both pieces of paper like small, silent promises. When the clock struck 9, she went to her room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed with her phone. Her thumb hovered over her contacts list until she found the name she hadn't used in years, Howard Kemp, the attorney who'd handled her husband's estate. The line clicked after 2 rings. "Howard Kemp." "Howard, it's Mabel Reed." Her voice didn't shake. "I need to ask you something about a property title." There was a pause, then the soft creak of a chair on the other end. "Tell me everything," he said. Mabel glanced toward the door, listening for footsteps that never came. Her pulse slowed, steadied. Outside, rain began to fall, light at first, then harder, drumming against the windows like an impatient hand. "I found something," she said. and I think it's time I found out exactly what they've done. By Wednesday morning, the rain had stopped, but the house still smelled faintly of damp wood and lemon cleaner. Mabel sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee cooling untouched beside her. Her phone buzzed once, then again. A notification. Rachel Whitmore posted a new photo. Mabel opened it without thinking. Rachel stood in front of a market stall, holding a wicker basket filled with flowers and folded linens. Her lips curved into that same practiced smile, chin tilted for the camera. The caption read, "Making room for what's next. A fresh starts." But it was the tag at the bottom that made Mabel's stomach turn. Downsizing. Her thumb hovered over the image. The comments rolled in fast, friends chiming in with heart emojis, little jokes about spring cleaning. None of them knew what making room really meant. A new message popped up from Lily. Voice message, 042. Mabel pressed play. Rachel's voice filled the room, bright and casual, the same tone she used when gossiping over brunch. "I told Jason it's not cruel, it's practical," Rachel was saying. "Once she's settled in assisted living, we'll have more space here. It's not like she needs all that furniture anymore. Half of it's ancient. I already called the resale place about the oak dresser." A pause, then a laugh. Jason's, low and uneasy. "Oh, come on," Rachel said, teasing. "You have to admit, it's funny." Mabel stopped the recording halfway through, her hand trembling. She stared at the phone for a long moment before hitting play again, this time listening all the way to the end. The laughter, the casual cruelty. It wasn't just a plan anymore. It was a joke they shared. She opened the folder in her notes app titled Evidence, created a new subfolder, and labeled it Voice Clips. Then she saved the recording, date stamped and backed up to the cloud. By noon, she was on the phone with Howard Kemp. His voice was calm, measured, the same dependable tone she remembered from decades before. "I've looked into the property transfer," he said. "The signatures are irregular, Mabel, and there are electronic authorizations tied to your old joint bank account. Were you aware of that?" She pressed her palm to her temple. "No. I don't even have online access to that account anymore." "Then you need to act fast," Howard said. "I can start the legal process, but first, secure your finances, change your passwords, and open an account in your own name at a separate institution, somewhere they wouldn't think to look." "Do you really think they'd—" "I think," he interrupted gently, "you're not imagining this." The words landed like a steadying hand on her shoulder. After hanging up, Mabel called Evelyn. Her friend arrived within the hour, the sound of her old station wagon rattling up the driveway. She carried a binder thick with plastic sleeves and handwritten notes. "These are your tax returns, title filings, and home assessments for the past 10 years, Evelyn said, setting it on the dining table. "If you're going to fight, you'll need a paper trail." Mabel flipped open the binder. Inside were copies of her original purchase documents, her husband's will, even old insurance papers. Each page was a memory of how hard she had worked to build something she could call her own. Evelyn watched her carefully. "You're handling this better than most people would." Mabel smiled faintly. "That's because I haven't shown them what handling it looks like yet." By nightfall, the house was quiet again. Jason and Rachel were upstairs, talking in low voices behind a closed door. Mabel sat in her room, laptop open, creating new passwords, long strings of letters and numbers no one could guess. Then she opened a new bank account online under her maiden name, Mabel Harper, a detail even Jason might have forgotten. As she filled out the final form, she glanced toward the purse sitting on her dresser, the one with the napkin, the forged title copy, and the voice recording tucked inside. Each item now had its place, each step another brick in something she was quietly building. When she finished, she shut the laptop and turned off the lamp. The room fell into shadow except for the faint blue glow of her phone screen, still showing Rachel's market photo. Mabel looked at it one last time and whispered to the empty room, "Keep laughing while you can." Outside, a single car door slammed. Mabel froze, listening. A voice, Rachel's, floated up faintly from the driveway. "Tomorrow morning," Rachel said, "we'll start moving things out." Mabel's eyes opened fully in the dark, clear and steady. Her pulse slowed, not from fear this time, but from resolve. Tomorrow, she thought, so will I. The next morning dawned sharp and pale, the kind of morning that carried a cold honesty. Mabel sat in the passenger seat of Howard Kemp's sedan, a neat folder clutched in her lap. Her nails, normally trimmed and bare, pressed faint crescents into the manila surface. Howard drove like he spoke, measured, deliberate, unhurried by anyone else's urgency. "You did the right thing," he said quietly, eyes on the road. "Most people wouldn't have caught it until it was too late." Mabel gave a tight smile. "Rachel's not most people." The county courthouse rose ahead, a squat brick building that looked older than the law it contained. Inside, the air was cool and faintly musty, carrying the scent of paper and coffee. A clerk behind the counter glanced up when they approached. A woman in her 40s with a kind face and the brisk confidence of someone who'd seen everything twice. "Morning," Mabel said. "I need to verify a property record. There's been confusion." The clerk motioned her closer. "Address?" Mabel slid the document forward. "Bungalow on Ashridge Lane, under my name, Mabel Reed, or possibly listed as joint ownership." The clerk's fingers moved quickly over the keyboard. After a moment, her expression shifted. Something subtle, but it made Mabel's stomach tighten. "Ma'am," the clerk said carefully, "there was an attempted title transfer filed electronically 2 weeks ago. It's marked pending final verification." Howard leaned in. "By whom?" The clerk squinted at the screen. "Jason Reed and Rachel Whitmore." She frowned. "But the secondary signature, your name, it looks scanned. Not original." Mabel felt the blood drain from her face. "Can you stop it?" "I can flag it," the clerk said. "Put a 30-day administrative hold for review. That'll freeze any processing until the county verifies the signatures. During that time, no sale or reassignment can go through." She looked up, voice softening. "You caught this early, Mrs. Reed. That's rare." Howard gave a small, approving nod. "Good work, Mabel. That binder you built probably saved your home." The clerk printed out a verification sheet, initialed the margin, and slid it across the counter. Mabel took it with steady hands, the paper crisp against her fingertips. For the first time in weeks, she felt something solid beneath her, something she had stopped trusting existed. Control. As they walked out into the parking lot, sunlight glinted off the courthouse windows. Mabel held the papers close to her chest. "They won't stop here," she said quietly. "No," Howard agreed. "But neither will you." That night, Lily insisted on staying over. She arrived with her backpack and her phone charger, dropping them by the sofa as if this were an ordinary sleepover. "Dad thinks I'm at Zoe's," she said, with a conspiratorial grin. "You're safer if someone's awake with you." Mabel looked at her granddaughter's small, fierce face and felt a flicker of pride. "All right," she said. "But no arguments when I tell you to rest. Deal." They made cocoa and sat together in the dim light of the living room. Outside, the wind moved through the trees with a low, restless sound. Every creak of the house made Lily glance toward the stairs, her phone recording quietly from the coffee table, just in case. At one point, Mabel caught her looking over. "You don't have to be scared, sweetheart." Lily's eyes were steady. "I'm not. I just don't like when people think they can do anything to you." A lump rose in Mabel's throat. She reached for Lily's hand and squeezed it once. "Neither do I." The clock on the mantel ticked toward midnight. Upstairs, the faint murmur of Rachel and Jason's voices drifted down the hall, muffled but tense. Evelyn stopped by briefly the next morning with coffee and determination. She placed her hands on the back of a chair and said, "You're not helpless, Mabel. You have proof, and people who'll stand with you." Mabel smiled, weary but resolute. "Then it's time to get organized." She carried her purse to the dining table, spread out the clerk's verification sheet, the copies of the deeds, and the new banking documents. Then she pulled a fresh red folder from her desk drawer and labeled it in neat block letters, Turner, Defense. Howard's firm name, Turner and Kemp, gleamed faintly in the embossed corner. She slid every piece of evidence inside: the forged title, the voice recording transcript, the clerk's hold notice, each page a small victory in the war she hadn't chosen but now fully owned. As she sealed the folder and pressed it flat, a car door shut outside. Then another. Laughter, Rachel's, filtered faintly through the window, carried on the morning air. Mabel's gaze didn't waver. She picked up her phone and typed a brief text to Howard. "Hold confirmed. They're back. I'll be ready. Then she set the phone beside the folder, took a steadying breath, and whispered to herself, calm, deliberate, unshaken. Let's see how they handle losing. The law office smelled of pine polish and paper, old paper, the kind that held its own gravity. Morning sunlight poured through the blinds in pale stripes, touching the mahogany table where Mabel sat across from Howard. The red Turner defense folder rested beside her like a small, loyal companion. Howard adjusted his glasses, tapping his pen against a stack of freshly printed pages. All right, he said softly. This version supersedes all previous wills and directives. You've reviewed the language? I have, Mabel said. Her tone was quiet but firm. She'd spent the night rereading every clause until the words carved themselves into memory. Howard nodded. Then let's go through it once more, out loud. He read with deliberate calm, each sentence carrying weight. You, Mabel Harper Reed, hereby revoke any prior wills and codicils. You name Evelyn Porter as executor of your estate. Evelyn sat beside her, chin lifted. I'll take good care of it, she murmured. I know, Mabel said, and meant it. Howard continued. You designate Lily Reed as beneficiary of a conditional trust, released upon her 30th birthday or completion of graduate education, whichever comes first. Mabel glanced at Lily, who sat across from her, hands folded, eyes shining with pride and worry. That should give her time to find her footing, Mabel said, and protection until she does. Exactly, Howard replied. The remainder of your estate, cash, securities, and any proceeds from sale, will go to the Westbridge Community Elder Center. And finally, he tapped the next line gently. Your home at Ashridge Lane is placed in a spendthrift trust, irrevocable, protecting it from sale or seizure by any current or future family members. The silence that followed was sacred, almost reverent. Then Evelyn exhaled, slow and sure. That means they can't touch it, not even if they try to contest. Correct, Howard said. The trust owns the home now, not any individual, which means Rachel and Jason can't turn my roof into their real estate project, Mabel finished for him. Good. Howard smiled faintly. Would you like to add any personal notes or endowment conditions? Mabel took a moment, her gaze drifting to the window where sunlight flashed off parked cars below. Just one, she said at last. Some lessons, she murmured, should be taught with permanence. Howard's pen paused midair. Then he nodded once, respectfully, and wrote the line exactly as she said it, adding it beneath the final signature block like an epigraph. He gathered the papers, straightened them, and turned them toward her. Ready when you are. Mabel signed her name in careful, deliberate strokes. No hesitation, no tremor. Each line felt like closing a door she'd left open too long. Howard notarized the documents, affixing the embossed seal with a firm press, the sound like a stamp of finality. Then he stood. These originals will be filed in our vault. Copies go to you, the executor, and the trust administrator. You're protected, Mabel, legally and financially. Mabel rose slowly, her joints stiff, but her spirit lightened. She reached out, clasped Howard's hand. You've done more than you know. He shook his head. You did this. I just wrote it down. Outside, the day had warmed, the wind moving softly through the courthouse square. Lily walked at her grandmother's side, the envelope of certified copies pressed against her chest. I'm proud of you, she said. Voice small but certain. Mabel smiled. I'm proud of us. They stopped by the car. Mabel slid the envelope into her purse and locked the clasp with a faint click. These go in my safe tonight, she said. Every copy, every page. As they drove home, the conversation drifted between quiet laughter and silence. Mabel felt the tension that had haunted her shoulders begin to ease, though not vanish. She knew better. Rachel would sense the shift before long, and she did. That afternoon, while Mabel sorted through a drawer of old photo albums, her phone lit up with a notification. Rachel Whitmore tagged in a photo. Mabel opened it slowly. The image showed her own reflection, caught in a glossy window behind Howard's office sign. Rachel must have been parked across the street, phone aimed, waiting for proof. The caption read, "When people start playing lawyer, you know something's up." Family drama. The comments below were worse. Half sympathetic, half gossiping, all invasive. Rachel's online audience eating it up. Through the window, Mabel saw a flash of red hair outside, the unmistakable swing of Rachel's coat as she slammed the car door and stalked toward the house. Inside, Lily looked up from the kitchen counter. "Grandma," Mabel didn't flinch. She closed the safe, spun the dial once, twice, listening for the lock to settle into place. Then she stood, smoothing her blouse as footsteps pounded up the porch steps. From outside came the rattle of the doorknob, a sharp knock, then Rachel's voice, strained, rising. "Mabel, open this door. What are you doing with my husband's attorney?" Lily moved to stand beside her. "Do you want me to answer it?" Mabel's eyes stayed fixed on the door, her face calm, unreadable. "No, darling, not yet." The knocking grew harder. Rachel's voice cracked into fury. Mabel touched the red folder on the table, then glanced at Lily, her expression cool and deliberate. "She can pound all she wants," she said, softly. "The paper's already signed." By the following Monday, Rachel had found a new weapon. The envelope arrived in a cream-colored sleeve stamped with the county seal, its language thick with polite menace. Petition for guardianship due to diminished capacity. Mabel read it twice at the kitchen table, her pulse a steady drumbeat under the words. She could almost hear Rachel's voice behind every line, smiling, condescending, rehearsed. "She's doing this to humiliate me," Mabel said quietly. Howard, seated opposite her, adjusted his tie and nodded. "And to stall the trust filings. But it won't work." Rachel's performance began immediately. Neighbors caught glimpses of her outside, tears at the ready. On Tuesday morning, Mabel stood at her window as Rachel talked animatedly with Mrs. Harmon across the street. One manicured hand pressed to her chest. Every so often, she gestured toward the house, her expression an artful mixture of sorrow and concern. Lily, standing beside her grandmother, frowned. "She's acting like she's saving you from yourself." "Let her perform," Mabel said. "Every show has an audience. But the truth," she tapped the envelope, "that's written in ink." 2 days later, Mabel sat in a narrow courthouse room with Howard and Evelyn flanking her. The court-appointed psychiatrist, a calm woman in her 50s, adjusted her glasses and began the evaluation. "All right, Mrs. Reed," she said. "I'm going to ask you a few questions about memory and orientation." Mabel nodded. "Go right ahead. What's today's date?" "May 14th, 2025, Mabel answered without pause. "It's Monday, 10:22 a.m., and your coffee is from Clover and Vine. You took 2 sugars. Howard smiled faintly at the corner of his mouth. "Impressive," the doctor murmured. "And the current president?" Mabel listed the name cleanly, then added the governor, the state's tax rate, and the property millage code by county. When asked to recall numbers, she recited the last 4 digits of 3 separate accounts, down to the cent balance on her most recent statement. Howard caught the doctor's look, one part surprise, one part admiration. "I keep my mind busy," Mabel said lightly. "Crosswords. Budgeting. Remembering who's trying to rob me." Evelyn chuckled softly beside her. By the time the test ended, the evaluator's notes filled 2 full pages. "Mrs. Reed," she said, "you're more lucid than most of the attorneys I've interviewed this year." "I'll take that as a compliment." Howard stood, collecting the affidavits he'd brought, 3 notarized medical statements from Mabel's longtime physician, each confirming full cognitive health. He handed them to the clerk with professional precision. "These affidavits," Howard said, "demonstrate not only competency, but an unbroken record of independent financial and civic responsibility. The petitioner's claim of diminished capacity is baseless." The judge, a silver-haired man with a voice like gravel, leaned forward. "We'll hear testimony before I decide." Lily took the stand first, clutching her phone in both hands. Her voice was soft but unwavering. "I recorded Rachel," she said. "She told my dad she'd have Grandma moved out before summer. I have the audio file." Howard played the clip, the courtroom filling with Rachel's unmistakable tone, mocking, dismissive, unguarded. The judge's brows lifted. Rachel's face, 2 rows away, went pale beneath her makeup. Evelyn was next. She walked to the stand carrying a heavy binder labeled Civic and Volunteer History in tidy black ink. "This," she told the court, "is 27 years of community service, fundraising, and volunteer hours." Mrs. Reed chaired the Historical Preservation Society, kept her own books, and balanced every annual audit to the penny. The judge nodded, flipping through pages. That'll do. By the time the hearing concluded, the courtroom's mood had shifted. Rachel sat rigid in her chair, her composure slipping. Jason avoided her eyes. Howard leaned toward Mabel, whispering, "He's already made up his mind." When the ruling came, it landed like a gavel-splitting stone. "The petition for guardianship is denied," the judge said. "There is no evidence of diminished capacity, nor any legitimate concern for Mrs. Reed's well-being. Further filings of this nature will be treated as frivolous and may incur sanctions." The clerk stamped the dismissal with a clean, decisive thunk. Mabel rose, her movements calm and measured. As she turned to leave, she caught Rachel's eyes, wide, blazing and trembling with the first real taste of defeat. Outside the courthouse, the spring air felt sharp and electric. Mabel paused at the top of the steps, sunlight glinting off the marble rail. Evelyn touched her shoulder. "You did it," she said softly. Mabel looked out across the square, where Rachel's red car idled at the curb, engine humming, her silhouette motionless behind the windshield. "She tried to put me in a cage," Mabel said, voice steady. "Now she's the one trapped in her own lies." Howard joined them, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "What now?" Mabel's eyes narrowed just slightly, her tone cool, almost serene. "Now," she said, "I let her wonder what I'll do next." Across the street, Rachel's car door opened. She stepped out slowly, her expression unreadable, half fury, half fear, as Mabel met her gaze and didn't look away. The traffic light turned green between them, washing both women in its brief, defiant glow. By Friday, Rachel had traded the courthouse for a new stage, social media. It began with a single post, a photo of Mabel's front porch, captioned, "Sad to see what dementia does to once vibrant people. Trying to do the right thing, but it's heartbreaking. Her family first, Parton tough love." The comments multiplied within hours. Neighbors, church friends, old acquaintances murmuring sympathy or disbelief. By evening, the local community board buzzed with speculation. Was Mabel really losing it? Had the court been mistaken? From her armchair, Mabel scrolled through the thread, her face unreadable. "She's counting on people's ignorance," she said finally. Lily sat cross-legged on the rug beside her, phone in hand. "Then let's give them facts instead of gossip." They moved carefully. Mabel drafted a short post. No anger, no pleading, just documentation. "For those concerned about my well-being, please see attached verified county hold confirmation, notarized affidavits, and receipts proving full ownership of my home. I appreciate those who value truth over theater." She uploaded the scans, clean, crisp, unimpeachable, and hit post. Within minutes, hearts and comments appeared. A few of Rachel's allies tried sarcasm, but the tone shifted as others began sharing Mabel's message. Facts, after all, travel slower than lies, but they last longer. The next day, Lily uploaded a short clip she'd taken weeks earlier. Rachel's voice floating through the kitchen, laughing. "Once she's tucked away, I can finally redo that awful wallpaper. No editing, no captions, just proof." The clip spread through the neighborhood group like dry grass catching fire. Some were shocked, some pretended not to be. Mrs. Harmon deleted her earlier comment and replaced it with, "Seems we all owe Mabel Reed an apology." By Saturday morning, Rachel's name had become a whispered subject at the market checkout line. "She really said that. Poor Mabel. I always thought that woman smiled too much." Evelyn, watching the shift with seasoned satisfaction, decided it was time for something less digital and more human. She booked the community center for Sunday evening, calling it a neighborhood clarity meeting. "Let them see the evidence in person," she told Mabel, setting out a tray of cookies as if they were ammunition. "Screens lie, faces don't." That evening, folding chairs filled the center's rec room. The air smelled faintly of coffee and floor polish. Mabel sat near the front with Lily and Howard, while Evelyn stood at the podium, her binder of documents neatly arranged. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't need to. "Some of you have seen posts questioning Mabel Reed's competency," she began. "Here are the court records denying those claims, and here's the judge's statement." She projected the document on the wall behind her, the words, "Petition denied," glowing clear and sharp. A murmur rippled through the room. Howard spoke next, measured and calm. My firm represents Mrs. Reed. She is of sound mind, financially independent, and legally protected. We ask that further gossip cease and any concerns be directed through proper channels. From the back, someone muttered, "Seems like she's got her act together." Lily rose then, holding her phone. "You've all heard the rumors. You should hear the truth." She played the voice clip again, the same mocking laugh, the same careless cruelty. The room went still. Evelyn closed the binder slowly. "We're not here to shame anyone," she said. "Just to remind you, lies can ruin lives, and Mabel Reed's life still belongs to her." Applause started small, then swelled, neighbors clapping not for spectacle, but for vindication. When it ended, Mabel stood quietly, thanking each person who approached her, some embarrassed, some apologetic, all newly attentive. Howard leaned close as they walked out. "You handled this perfectly, but don't take the bait online. Let your proof speak, not your temper." "I don't need to shout," Mabel said. "The truth echoes on its own." Outside, dusk settled over Ashridge Lane. Porch lights blinked on one by one, small circles of warmth in the gathering dark. Across the street, Rachel's house remained unlit, curtains drawn. Evelyn exhaled beside her. "Silence from that one. Think she's regrouping." Mabel's lips curved in a faint, knowing smile. "Of course she is. Losing face stings worse than losing money." Just then, Lily's phone buzzed with a new alert. She glanced at the screen and her expression changed. Part alarm, part satisfaction. "Grandma," she said. "Rachel just sent a private message to Dad. Something about a final decision." Mabel's eyes hardened. The night breeze tugged at her sleeve as she looked back toward Rachel's darkened windows. Then she said quietly, "It's her move again." By Monday morning, Howard had already filed the subpoena. "Phone records don't lie," he'd said over the phone, his tone clipped but certain. "If the messages came from Rachel's number, we'll have timestamps, carriers, the whole chain." Now, 2 days later, Mabel sat across from him again. Same table, same clean legal light. Only this time, her patience had sharpened into something colder. Howard flipped open the report. Every anonymous post, every concerned neighbor text, traced back to the same IP. Registered under Rachel Whitmore's cell account. He turned the page so Mabel could see the header herself. Verified origin, 916-237-1045. Rachel's number. Mabel exhaled slowly. "So all those stories about me wandering at night, or leaving the stove on, she sent them herself?" Howard nodded. "All of them. She used 3 burner apps, but the billing trail still points to her carrier. We'll submit this as supplemental evidence." Evelyn leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "She built an entire fiction." "No," Mabel corrected softly. "She built a mirror and tried to hang it around my neck." When the first article appeared on the local digital bulletin, "Neighborhood feud deepens amid fraud claims," Rachel publicly denied everything. "I would never harass anyone, least of all family. Some people just can't handle being held accountable." The performance was flawless. The photo attached showed Rachel with misted eyes, hand on heart, standing beside Jason as though posing for pity. But private messages began leaking within days. Screenshots, timestamps, Rachel's voice memos, even a sarcastic reply to one of her own anonymous comments. "Exactly, the poor thing's losing it." By Thursday, the narrative flipped like a coin in midair. The same neighbors who once whispered at grocery aisles now sent quiet messages of apology. And then came something unexpected. Boxes. The first arrived at noon. A cardboard crate left on Mabel's porch, marked with a note that read simply, "This belonged to you." Inside lay her porcelain pitcher, the one Rachel had told everyone she'd donated to charity. The next day, 2 more appeared. Her husband's old clock, a framed map of Ashridge County, and the silver-handled brush she'd kept since college. By Saturday, 5 boxes lined the porch like silent witnesses. Evelyn arrived that afternoon, her sleeves rolled up, Lily beside her with her phone ready. "Let's document everything," Evelyn said briskly. "Photos, serial numbers, receipts. If she moved your property without consent, that's theft." They laid the items across the dining table. Lily moved around them methodically, photographing each piece with careful precision, while Mabel logged descriptions in neat handwriting. Here's the date, Lily said, holding up her screen. Time-stamped and geotagged. Mabel smiled faintly. Good. Evidence with manners. By evening, the dining room had transformed into a kind of archive. Every item labeled, cross-referenced, photographed twice. Evelyn looked around with quiet pride. This table used to hold pot roasts, she said. Now it holds receipts and revenge. Mabel chuckled softly. Times change. At 9 p.m., Howard called. His voice carried satisfaction beneath the calm. The police have the documentation. The harassment complaint's been filed. With the texts and recovered property, they're classifying it as attempted fraud and defamation. Mabel felt the air shift in her chest, lighter, though not yet free. What happens next? They'll notify her, officially, and when they do, she'll know you're not just fighting back, you're winning. The following morning, a black and white cruiser idled outside Rachel's driveway. Mabel watched through her lace curtains as two officers walked up the path. Rachel appeared in her robe, feigning surprise, voice raised just loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "I've done nothing wrong," she shouted, gesturing wildly. The officers remained impassive, one of them handing her a folded notice. Jason emerged moments later, face pale, muttering under his breath as Rachel argued, her words bouncing uselessly against the spring air. Across the street, Mrs. Harmon stepped onto her porch, arms crossed. "Looks like that heartbreak hashtag came full circle," she whispered to Evelyn, who stood beside her with arms folded. Mabel said nothing. She simply closed her curtain halfway, her reflection faint in the glass. For the first time in weeks, her house looked and felt untouched, whole again. Lily joined her at the window. "Grandma, everyone's talking about what she did. They're on your side now." Mabel's voice was steady. "The truth doesn't need sides, sweetheart. It just needs light." Outside, Rachel stood frozen on the lawn as the cruiser pulled away, the warning notice trembling in her hand. Howard's text arrived minutes later, case moving forward. Press instructed to retract false coverage. You've won this round. Mabel set her phone down on the table beside her folder. "Round," she murmured. "Not the fight." Evelyn looked at her sharply. "You think she'll stop?" Mabel's gaze shifted toward the window again, where Rachel's silhouette paced behind the curtains, restless, unraveling. "No," she said. "She's too proud to quit. And pride always writes its own ending." Outside, thunder rumbled low over Ashridge Lane, the sky darkening in a slow, deliberate swell. Mabel touched the edge of her evidence log, her pen poised above the final line, and whispered almost to herself, "Let her make her next mistake." The courthouse smelled of rain and cold marble, damp air clinging to the high ceilings, footsteps echoing like slow heartbeats. Mabel sat at the plaintiff's table beside Howard, her red Turner, defense folder close but ready. Across the aisle, Rachel smoothed her hair and whispered to Jason, her posture rehearsed, her expression pure indignation. "Civil hearing, read vs. read," the clerk announced. "Petition, undue influence and coercion regarding estate amendments." Mabel's jaw stayed steady. She'd expected this move. Rachel couldn't win with lies, so now she'd weaponized truth itself, twisting every word until it bent toward her narrative. The judge, a woman in her early 60s with an iron composure and a calm, surgical voice, took her seat. "Let's proceed. Mrs. Whitmore, your claim states your mother-in-law was coerced into changing her will. On what grounds?" Rachel stood, palms pressed dramatically to the table. "She's been manipulated, Your Honor. She's not herself. She's been coached by Mr. Kemp and her friend Evelyn to cut family out of her estate. She's vulnerable, easily led, and this—" She gestured toward Mabel. "This is not the woman I married into this family knowing." Mabel didn't blink. Howard rose. "Your Honor, if I may respond." The judge nodded, briefly. "Mrs. Reed's will was executed in my office, under full notarization, witnessed by 2 parties and certified by our firm. I have affidavits from both witnesses confirming that Mrs. Reed acted independently, without pressure. I also have documentation, handwritten ledger entries in her own hand, corroborating her financial intentions over the past 6 months." He opened the binder, sliding forward 3 sheets in neat plastic sleeves. The faint scent of ink and paper filled the air. Rachel folded her arms, trying to appear calm, but her foot tapped beneath the table. Howard continued, voice smooth as glass. Furthermore, Your Honor, phone records and text messages demonstrate a pattern of harassment and attempted fraud by the petitioner, conduct wholly inconsistent with concern for Mrs. Reed's welfare. He motioned to the projection screen. The courtroom lights dimmed. Text threads appeared. Rachel's number, her burner accounts, the smug phrases that once bloomed like poison across the community board. Each message glowed with time-stamped precision. Rachel's eyes flickered. Jason shifted uneasily beside her. Howard let the silence stretch. If this is concern, he said finally, then it's a concern that begins with defamation and ends with self-interest. The judge's gaze moved from Howard to Rachel. Do you have a response, Mrs. Whitmore? Rachel stood again, color rising high on her cheeks. Those messages were taken out of context. People were impersonating me online. You know how the internet is. Anyone can fake. The judge raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. Enough. We have verified subpoenas and authentication by the carrier. These are not impersonations. Her tone hardened. You will not insult this court with that line again. Rachel froze, her practiced composure cracking. Howard turned slightly. At this time, the defense calls Lily Reed. Lily approached the stand, small in frame but firm in step. She held her phone like a talisman. Howard's questions were simple, clean. Lily, did you hear your stepmother make statements about your grandmother's home and possessions? Yes. Lily's voice carried clearly through the room. She told Dad Grandma should sleep on the floor because it would be cozy. Later, she said she'd start selling her things once Grandma was moved out. I recorded it. Howard played the clip. Rachel's laughter, sharp, careless, filled the courtroom. The sound echoed against the marble walls, stark and undeniable. Jason lowered his head. The judge leaned back, exhaling. We will now review the trust and hold documentation. Howard passed over the county clerk's 30-day hold verification and the irrevocable spendthrift trust filings. The judge scanned them, her expression unreadable until she reached the signatures. Howard's seal, Evelyn's witness mark, and Mabel's steady hand. This paperwork, the judge said, tapping the page, is impeccable, and it clearly predates the petitioner's claim. Mrs. Whitmore, it appears you attempted to contest a legally established trust with falsified concerns. Rachel's face drained of color. That's not, you can't just... The gavel struck once. Sit down. Her voice broke into a whisper, the kind born from disbelief. She's turning everyone against me. But the judge's gaze stayed on her, unflinching. You did that yourself. When the ruling came, it was short, final, and devastating. The court finds no evidence of coercion. The petition is dismissed. An accounting will be ordered to review Mrs. Reed's property for any unauthorized transfers, and any interference henceforth will result in contempt sanctions. Rachel stood frozen. The clerk marked the dismissal with a hard stamp that echoed like thunder. Outside, the courthouse steps gleamed wet from the morning drizzle. Cameras waited, local reporters murmuring, their lenses catching every movement. Mabel stepped into the light, unhurried, Lily at her side. Howard paused beside them, murmuring, "It's over, for now." But Mabel's eyes didn't leave the reporters. She knew Rachel's kind of anger didn't fade. It fermented. As microphones angled toward her, she spoke calmly. The truth always takes time, but it arrives. That's all I ever needed. Behind them, the doors swung open. Rachel emerged, face pale, mascara streaked, snapping. You'll regret this, before Jason pulled her back. The flashbulbs caught her mid-scream, a picture that would run across the evening bulletins. That night, the neighborhood page posted a headline. Court clears Mabel Reed. Judge rebukes false claims. Applause emojis flooded the comments. Sympathy tilted fully her way. But as Mabel watched from her kitchen window, she caught a darker movement beyond the streetlight. Rachel's car creeping past. Headlights off, slow as a shadow. Mabel's hand hovered over her phone. She didn't call anyone. She only whispered to herself, "She's not done." And deep down, she hoped she wasn't. The restitution hearing took place in a smaller courtroom, stripped of grandeur but dense with tension. No reporters, no gallery murmurs. Just a clerk, a court recorder, the judge, and the rustle of documents exchanged like weapons. Mabel sat straight-backed, hands folded over her coat. Her Turner, defense folder remained closed this time. The battle was quieter now, but no less lethal. Across from her, Rachel looked withered. The brightness she'd once worn like armor had dulled. Her cheekbones too sharp, lips pinched. Jason sat beside her, jaw clenched, suit slightly rumpled. His tie was crooked, his eyes more sunken than angry. He was here, but not with her. The judge, the same woman who had presided before, flipped through the compiled records. We are here today to review evidence of unauthorized withdrawals, charges, and transfers from accounts held in the name of Dorothy Reed, occurring within the months of February through May. Rachel's mouth parted, like she might object. Jason reached out, just barely, and touched her sleeve. She swallowed the impulse. Howard cleared his throat, passing another document to the bench. As outlined, Your Honor, these transactions include personal expenditures made using Mrs. Reed's debit card while she was under medical care, including 1-week stays at 2 boutique hotels in Sarasota, jewelry purchases totaling over $6,000, and 2 wire transfers labeled consulting, both to accounts controlled solely by the petitioner. The judge didn't look up, and the bank confirmed Mrs. Reed was incapacitated at the time. Howard nodded. Signed physician letters. Dates match hospital records. Rachel leaned forward. That money was for her care. She wanted comfort. The judge's hand went up again. You do not have the floor. Jason spoke then, surprising everyone. I didn't know about the jewelry. His voice cracked like ice underfoot. She told me her mother-in-law gave permission. No record of permission. No witnesses. No written authorization, the judge said flatly. And the spending pattern aligns with a personal vacation itinerary. Right down to the wine tastings. Rachel flinched. Silence pressed in like humidity. The judge turned one final page, then looked up. Mrs. Whitmore, the court finds you personally liable for restitution in the amount of $18,472.39. You will repay this directly to the Reed Family Trust. I am also referring this matter to the county's Elder Financial Abuse Unit for independent review. Rachel's mouth opened, but no words came. Her eyes darted toward Jason, who was already staring straight ahead, jaw locked. The silence between them now was no longer thick with tension. It was hollow. Due within 60 days, the judge finished. No extensions. The gavel fell once, softer this time, but heavier. Back in the hallway, the click of heels echoed as Rachel stormed ahead. Jason lagged behind, rubbing his eyes, then turned to Mabel without warning. She's not well, he said, but I'm done trying to explain it away. Mabel studied him, long and clear. She made choices, Jason. Don't you forget that part. He gave a small nod. Not agreement, acceptance. Outside, there were no cameras this time, just clouds thinning across the late afternoon sky. Mabel stepped into the light drizzle, Evelyn waiting by the car with her usual calm. In the passenger seat, Mabel opened the envelope Rachel had slammed onto the courtroom table before leaving. Check 1 of 3, post-dated and thin. Evelyn leaned over, eyebrows raised. She thought she could live on your goodwill. Mabel folded the check into the trust file. Not a flicker of emotion on her face. She'll live on her bills. At home, the living room looked different now, clean, whole. The old floral carpet had been replaced with a thick, soft weave in deep gray. No folded cot. No tension in the walls. A new throw blanket draped the back of the couch, sunlight curling across its tassels like forgiveness. Lily posted a photo that evening. She can walk barefoot now. Grandma's home is home again. The comments filled with hearts and clapping hands. Mabel watched them scroll across the screen, but didn't smile. Later, she stepped out onto the porch with a cup of tea, eyes scanning the street. It was quiet. Leaves skittered along the sidewalk. A neighbor waved, but then she noticed it, again. Parked 3 houses down in the same spot as before, the dark SUV. Headlights off, engine quiet, motionless. Mabel narrowed her eyes. She walked inside, locked the door, and drew the curtain. On the table behind her, the second restitution check waited in its envelope, but she already knew. Rachel wasn't paying up to move on. She was paying up to buy time. The appellate hearing wasn't held in the same courthouse. This one was taller, colder, with walls that didn't remember you. There were no whispers this time, just the tick of the courtroom clock and the low murmur of legal breath before argument. Mabel sat in the second row behind Howard, her coat folded neatly over her lap. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. In front of her, Howard's appellate brief rested like stone, over 90 pages meticulously bound, the first page stamped in bold. Response to petition for appellate relief. Reed v. Reed. Rachel sat farther off this time, 2 benches away, flanked by a young attorney with stiff posture and a too-slick briefcase. Jason wasn't beside her. He hadn't shown up. The presiding judge was male, older, with a demeanor less surgical than the trial judge's, but just as unreadable. He adjusted his glasses, looked down at the files, and then up at the parties. We are here regarding an appeal challenging the establishment and execution of a private family trust. The petitioner claims undue influence, despite the original ruling citing sufficient evidence of independent action and clear intent. Is that correct, Mr. Kemp? Howard rose, voice low and deliberate. It is, Your Honor, and I've submitted under separate exhibits, notarized witness accounts, contemporaneous financial documents, and video evidence confirming Mrs. Dorothy Reed's full mental faculties at the time of signing. The judge glanced at the screen as Howard pressed a button. A still image appeared, Dorothy Reed, sitting at a table with a pen in hand, smiling faintly as she signed. Mabel beside her but not speaking, not even looking at the papers. Evelyn visible in the background, watching quietly. Howard continued. Additionally, letters from members of the community, over 40 of them, were submitted in support of Mrs. Reed's intentions, including those from her pastor, 2 of her caretakers, and the neighborhood council president. The judge raised a brow. The same neighborhood where Mrs. Whitmore currently resides? For now, Howard replied evenly. The judge turned. Petitioner's counsel. Rachel's lawyer stood, ill-prepared. He gestured vaguely toward inconsistencies in Dorothy's handwriting, questioned her awareness without foundation, leaned too hard on phrases like pattern of alienation and family destabilization. But the judge had already turned a page. There's nothing new here, nothing legally actionable. He set the folder down. Petitioner's appeal is denied. The trust stands. Costs awarded to the appellee. A final knock of the gavel ended it. Rachel didn't move. Her lawyer mumbled something and walked out ahead of her. Mabel stayed seated until the room emptied. Only then did she stand. Outside, the sky was pale and quiet, the wind brushing leaves along the courthouse steps. Evelyn met her halfway with coffee in hand. Any drama? No, just silence, Mabel sipped. The right kind. They walked down the steps together as a passing car slowed, Rachel behind the wheel, alone, her face drawn but tight, like a mask clinging too long to skin. She didn't look at them, just turned the corner and kept driving. Over the next week, Mabel's inbox lit up with forwards and screenshots. Rachel removed from HOA Planning Committee. Next door ban issued for harassment. Request to speak at Fall Festival withdrawn. Community discomfort cited. The last one was from Jason. Just a single line. I'm sorry, I should have listened sooner. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. That Sunday after church, Lily brought home a thick envelope and slid it across the kitchen table. Open it. Inside was a notarized packet, an official filing to open a college fund trust in Mabel's name, Lily listed as primary trustee. I got a few scholarships, Lily said quietly. I want the rest of the money to mean something. I want it to go where it's earned. Mabel's throat tightened. That's not necessary. It is, Lily said. You showed me what legacy really means. Mabel ran her fingers over the seal, the embossed paper smooth and heavy in her palm. She looked out the window as Evelyn pulled into the drive, groceries in the back seat, and for the first time in weeks, Mabel felt something shift in her chest. Not relief, not triumph. Something quieter, like the room had finally stopped spinning. She stood and set the trust packet beside the untouched envelope containing Rachel's third and final check. Then she walked into the living room, but before she reached the fireplace, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She stared at it, then answered. A woman's voice, hushed but urgent. You don't know me, but I used to work for Rachel. You need to see something before she burns it. Mabel blinked. What is it? A pause. She kept more than you think. The knock came on a Tuesday, not sharp or hurried, just firm, deliberate. Mabel opened the front door to find a woman she hadn't seen in over 5 years standing on her porch in a mauve pantsuit and pearls. Clara Whitmore, the woman said, not waiting for an invitation before stepping inside. Her perfume was strong and powdery, a scent that clung to power luncheons and floral church hats. Jason said you were home. Mabel said nothing at first. She didn't need to. Clara looked around the house as if she were inspecting a former estate. Chin lifted, gaze flicking across the refinished carpet, the floral china in the hutch, the photo of Dorothy on the mantel. I brought cinnamon scones, Clara said, placing a tin on the kitchen counter. It's something your mother-in-law used to love. Back when the family had fewer legal entanglements, Mabel offered a nod. Tea? I assume it's not the cheap kind. As Mabel filled the kettle, Clara took a seat uninvited at the kitchen table, tapping her manicured nails against the wood. You know, Clara began, her tone brittle as glass. Families go through hard things. They fall apart, they mend, but they don't drag each other through courts and headlines. That's not legacy, it's theater. Mabel poured 2 cups of tea and set one gently in front of her. Then maybe Rachel should have picked a smaller stage. Clara's smile didn't reach her eyes. She made mistakes, but she's my daughter, and you've made her life difficult. Mabel sat across from her, calm and still. Rachel made her life difficult. I just didn't hand her the scissors when she wanted to cut me out. Clara's mask slipped for a second, her mouth tightening. Jason's been pulled between loyalties. You've always had a way of making him feel guilty for not siding with you. He's his own man, Mabel replied. Or at least, he could be. A pause stretched between them. Clara reached for a scone, broke it neatly in half, and said in a voice dipped in venom, You may have won the court's favor, but legacy is about more than trust documents. You've become disruptive, Mabel, and there's still time to do the right thing. Mabel stared at her for a long moment, then lifted her teacup, the steam rising slow and fragrant. Paper, she said quietly, speaks louder than promises. Clara blinked, clearly unprepared for such stillness. Just then, Evelyn arrived through the back door, arms full of bright flyers. Afternoon? I got the final approvals. Volunteer Day at the Elder Center is on. We're using the discretionary clause for funding outreach, so it's all covered. You'll want to see this. She laid the papers on the counter, cheerful and efficient as ever, and then noticed Clara. Her smile dropped half an inch. Oh, hello, Clara stood, brushing imaginary lint from her sleeves. I see some people still find use in being helpful. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. It's not use, it's purpose. Clara gave her a tight smile, then turned to Mabel. I'll be staying with Jason for the week. I'd appreciate if we could keep things civil, for everyone's sake. Of course, Mabel said smoothly, rising. We're always civil in this house, even when visitors aren't. Clara paused at the door, as if waiting for Mabel to recant. When she didn't, she left without a word. Later that week, the volunteer day arrived. The Elder Center bloomed with activity, tables decorated with autumn leaves, students from Lily's school reading aloud, donated books and fresh-baked goods passed around like blessings. Mabel stood in the background, not at the podium. That belonged to Helen Hastings, the neighborhood council president, whose praise rang clear into the microphone. This community owes a great debt to Mrs. Reed for restoring a sense of dignity to those forgotten by families, more concerned with inheritance than honor. Clara stood in the back row, face pinched as a camera snapped her reaction. That night, as Mabel returned home, she found an envelope on her front step. Inside, a copy of the Elder Center's donor plaque and a handwritten note in Rachel's curling script. You think this makes you untouchable. It doesn't. Mabel looked up toward the dark street. The SUV was gone. In its place, an unfamiliar sedan, windows tinted black, parked closer to her driveway than ever before. The letter arrived certified, heavy stock, a red stamped seal across the corner that always meant scrutiny. Mabel opened it at the kitchen table, sunlight streaking in across the counter, dust drifting like slow confetti. She read it once, then again. County Trustee Audit Notification, per statute and citizen inquiry. An independent financial review will be conducted of the Reed Family Trust. Mabel folded the letter slowly. She didn't flinch, didn't curse. She just rose, walked to the drawer beside the fridge, and pulled out a box labeled Receipts, Legacy. Inside were tabbed folders, color-coded, each one dated and stamped, handwritten notations, scanned invoices, canceled checks with Dorothy's looping signature. She'd kept everything. Still, something sank in her chest, like a tide pulling out farther than expected. That evening, she called Howard. "They're not looking for a problem," he said calmly, "but they need proof there isn't one." The inquiry came from a private submission. "Rachel," Mabel said flatly, "almost certainly, but it doesn't matter. You've done everything by the book. By 3 books, honestly." For 2 weeks, auditors came and went. Young professionals with tablets and quiet voices, asking polite but pointed questions. Mabel answered them all. Offered tea. Pointed to where Evelyn had logged volunteer expenses, where Lily had categorized grant dispersals by quarter. Every number had a story. Every dollar had a receipt. When they left, one of them paused at the door. "I've never seen a file structure this clean," he said, half amazed. "You should teach a course." Mabel only smiled. "Life taught it to me." The final report landed on a Monday. A full binder this time, spiral bound, delivered by courier. Lily opened it first, reading aloud from the cover page. Findings: no irregularities, full transparency. Exemplary stewardship noted in both financial diligence and philanthropic use of trust assets. Mabel leaned back in her chair, exhaling so deeply it almost sounded like a laugh. The next day, the Springfield Gazette ran a headline above the fold: "Elder Establishes Legacy, Weathering Family Storm." The subhead read, "Audit Finds Reed Family Trust a Model of Accountability and Compassion." Beneath it, a photo from Volunteer Day, Mabel in profile, mid-laugh, a paper cup in her hand, surrounded by seniors and schoolchildren and neighbors with their sleeves rolled up. Clara left town quietly the following morning, and then something happened Mabel didn't expect. A knock at the door, not the sharp rap of official business or the scraping thud of Rachel's vengeance. It was lighter, hesitant. She opened it to find Lily standing with a cluster of neighborhood faces. Helen Hastings in her wide-brimmed hat, DeAndre from the senior center, Mrs. Packer from the post office, even one of the auditors in a windbreaker holding a manila envelope. "We wanted to do this in person," Helen said, stepping forward. "For your grace, for your strength, for proving that doing things the right way still matters." Lily lifted a small wooden plaque, freshly engraved. "Mabel Reed, for unshakable integrity in the face of fire." Mabel's throat caught. Not from pride, from the way they looked at her, not as a cautionary tale, but as something earned, something proven. "They mocked where I slept," she said softly, taking the plaque with both hands. "Now they watch me stand." There was applause, a few tears, a casserole dish she didn't recognize. Evelyn took photos, catching everyone off guard and grinning. But amid the warmth, a detail tugged at the edge of her attention. Lily slipped her a folder once the others had gone. This came to the school address. "You should see it." Inside, a withdrawal notice. Rachel's final lawsuit, one aimed at overturning trust amendments through a technicality, had been officially retracted. No motion, no hearing, just voluntarily dismissed under Rule 41A. No explanation, no signature line, just an attached note. Per client request, no further action to be taken. Howard confirmed it later that day. "She's done. Public pressure got to her. Or maybe donors walked. Either way, she's out." Mabel nodded. Good. But when night fell and Evelyn headed home and Lily curled up to study in the den, Mabel stood by the kitchen window again. The unfamiliar sedan had vanished. Street quiet. Until her porch light flickered. Then again. She stepped outside, checking the bulb. Nothing loose. Then she saw it. A single sharp scratch across the front door frame. Fresh, deep, almost deliberate. And on the welcome mat, a scorched envelope, empty, still warm. This wasn't over. This was the silence before the storm. The hall smelled faintly of wood polish and lemon cake. Rows of folding chairs lined the community center like pews. each one filled with faces Mabel recognized, some dimly, some intimately. Helen Hastings stood at the side of the modest stage, whispering last-minute adjustments to the sound tech. Lily stood near the punch bowl, her hair swept into a low bun, watching Mabel the way you'd watch a tightrope walker, awed, a little nervous, proud. At the back of the room, Jason leaned against the doorframe. His shoulders were slightly slumped, eyes darting to the floor every few minutes. Rachel sat stiffly 3 rows from the back, lips pressed into a line, arms folded across her chest like they were welded there. Her blazer was ironed to perfection, but the expression behind it had wilted. The mic squealed once, brief, sharp, then settled. Helen stepped up. Tonight we honor not just stewardship, not just accountability, but courage. Courage to lead with integrity when it would have been easier to step back. Please welcome Mabel Reed. Applause rose as Mabel took the stage. It wasn't thunderous, it was respectful. Earnest. Lily clapped with her whole body. Evelyn whistled once before catching herself and muttering an embarrassed, "Sorry." Mabel adjusted the mic. Her notes stayed folded in her hand. "I was never meant to lead anything," she began, her voice steady and clean. "I was meant to support, to serve, to be the quiet one in the room who made sure other people had what they needed." She paused, eyes on the crowd. Someone near the front blinked fast behind their glasses. But when someone tries to erase your name, your work, and the hands that helped build a life, you learn to stand. Not loud, not vengeful, just standing. More silence. Then, this trust was never about money. It was about legacy, about dignity, about community. Not just for my mother-in-law, but for every senior in this town who feels forgotten the second they slow down. A shift in the room, breaths held. That's why tonight I'm announcing the Reed Legacy Fund for Seniors, an annual scholarship for adults over 60 who want to go back to school, start a business, or launch a community program. Because their lives aren't done, and neither is their impact. That's when the room moved. The applause this time rose like wind through trees, uncontained and warm. People stood, one by one, then in waves. Even Helen blinked furiously behind her bifocals. A local cameraman adjusted his tripod and zoomed in as Mabel stepped back from the mic. Jason clapped, too, slow, reluctant, hands too heavy, but his face held nothing but shame. Rachel didn't move. Her arms stayed folded. Her eyes stayed on Mabel like twin scalpels. Later, the hall bustled with warmth and chatter. Evelyn had brought 2 pecan pies, and someone else had shown up with lemon bars and a tray of deviled eggs. Lily slipped her phone into her bag and wrapped Mabel in a one-armed hug, whispering, "You killed it." "I survived it," Mabel whispered back. Neighbors stopped her for photos. The council president handed her a second certificate of appreciation, this one laminated just in case anyone tries to erase it. Someone started playing a folk song on a dusty, upright piano in the corner. Even the air felt celebratory. But eventually the room emptied. The lights dimmed. The pie was reduced to crumbs and crusts. Evelyn hugged her tight at the car. "You were grace incarnate, girl." Mabel smiled, tired but lifted. "I didn't fall apart." "No," Evelyn said. "You held the line." When she returned home, the porch light glowed steady for once. The door frame untouched, the welcome mat back in place, but something sat on top of it. Small, square, wrapped in dark green paper with no tag. She crouched down slowly, examined the edges. Not Rachel's style, not anything from a neighbor. She turned it once, twice, then opened it carefully. Inside, a navy blue velvet box. She opened it. A key, not old, not ornate, new. Attached to a plain brass tag with a single word etched in shaky handwriting. "Sorry." J. Mabel stood for a long moment in the doorway, staring at it. Then her phone buzzed. A voicemail notification. She listened. Jason's voice hushed and cracked. "She's not here. She's gone. But you should see what she left behind. I'm afraid it's worse than we thought." The message ended with the sound of a door opening, and someone else whispering his name. The envelope was thin, creased at the corners, and smelled faintly of mildew. No return address, just a smudged postmark from a neighboring county. Mabel opened it at the kitchen table, her tea cooling beside her untouched. Inside, a copy of an eviction notice. The header read, "Notice to vacate, immediate." The tenant names, Jason Whitmore and Rachel Whitmore. The reason, non-payment and lease breach following civil judgment garnishments. Mabel read it once, then again, folded it with care, as if it were an artifact, then slipped it into a manila folder in the cabinet marked Lessons. She flipped past tabs labeled False Claims, Appeal Briefs, Restitution, and added this one to the end. Beside it, a postcard leaned upright against the corkboard. A photo from the ceremony, laminated mid-speech, with Lily clapping in the background and Evelyn caught mid-laugh. Mabel framed it that afternoon and placed it by the front door, just beneath the coat hooks. "This is where the weight gets hung," she murmured. Later that day, Evelyn and Lily returned. Arms full of tools, a small step stool, and a wrapped bundle of polished brass. They helped Mabel hang a plaque just beside the door frame, level and even. "This home is held for care, not for those who take." It gleamed softly in the afternoon light. "Think it's too much?" Lily asked, half smiling, hammer still in hand. "No," Mabel said. "I think it's exactly enough." The doorbell rang an hour later. Howard, holding his leather-bound portfolio, trust amendments in one hand, a flash drive in the other. "It's done," he said, stepping inside. Legacy protections now flow matrilineally. Lily inherits directly, with Evelyn as alternate trustee if needed. Community grants locked in at 10% annually. "And the rest?" Mabel asked, arching a brow. "Rachel?" He nodded. "Her window is closed. She's entitled only to residual cash value, post-distributions, post-asset holds." Mabel smirked faintly. The leftovers from the things she tried to steal. Howard didn't respond. He didn't need to. That evening, a message came through. Private, unsentimental. Jason, he didn't call. He texted, just 4 lines. "I found her sleeping in her car. We lost the lease. I know I was blind. If there's anything I can do, just tell me what's left." Mabel stared at the screen for a long time before typing. Her fingers hovered above the keys as Evelyn watched silently from across the room. Then she wrote back, "You want peace? Start with truth. Get a job. Apologize without needing absolution. Send Lily the $500 you owe her from her textbooks last fall. I'll hear you out after that." She hit send. And that was all. No second message came. 3 days later, Lily found Rachel parked 2 blocks away from the high school, curled in the passenger seat of a sedan that had been in the neighborhood far too often. Trash bags in the back, a pillow wedged against the door. "She didn't see me," Lily said later, her voice low. "But she looked smaller." "She is," Mabel said. Finally. At sunset, Evelyn returned with a rolled-up carpet sample. She spread it across the porch, soft and pale beige. "Found it on clearance. Matches the living room," she said casually, "in case you want to refresh again." Mabel shook her head. "Leave it. I've grown used to what's under my feet." Inside, Mabel updated the household ledger. A final transfer was initiated to the senior scholarship fund. Lily brought her a glass of lemon water and curled beside her on the couch. "Do you think she'll ever ask for help?" Mabel looked toward the dark window. "No, but someday she might wish she had." That night the wind shifted. Not cold, not biting, just clean. Mabel stood on the porch one last time before bed, letting the screen door whisper closed behind her. She stared out into the quiet, the driveway empty, the air finally still. The weight had lifted, not vanquished, but earned its place in memory. Her gaze drifted downward to the mat at her feet. That familiar woven pattern. The plaque on the wall glinted beside her, solid, silent, true. And in her mind, Mabel heard it again. Rachel's voice, brittle and smug. "Why don't you sleep on the floor?" Mabel smiled, nodded once to herself, and thought, "I did." And later, I made sure the floor was the only thing she'd ever inherit from me.